Hey guys, taking a brief break to remind you to like and subscribe, as this will really help the channel out. Plus, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified so you don't miss any of our future videos. All right, welcome back everyone. This is our third episode of Sleeve It or Leave It. I have with me once again Jason co-hosting this episode, and today we're going to go over Kang the Conqueror. And right now, MCU is promoting Kang the Conqueror. He's the new big bad, taking over for Thanos. I don't know if he can fill Thanos' shoes. We're going to discuss this and see if he measures up in any way to Thanos. But we'll get into that a little bit further. So, first off, just a real brief overview of Kang the Conqueror. When I was growing up, I really didn't read any Kang the Conqueror, so I wasn't really exposed to him. I mean, I saw him a couple of comic books like the Infinity Wars. He was actually, the actual partner of Doctor Doom trying to get the Infinity Gauntlet, but he was trying to get those time cubes, those space cubes that Adam Warlock's clone, his evil clone, was trying to get a hold of.
It's always the evil twin.
Exactly. He had an evil twin. And then he also had another twin that was like a female that was even worse, but that was in Infinity Crusade, but I digress. But that's the only exposure I ever had of Kang when I was, growing up and reading the comics in the 90s. So I wasn't a real big fan, but we wanted to learn a little bit more about Kang the Conqueror because, everybody's interested. Who is Kang the Conqueror? What's his story? And we're going to get into that right now. So first off, we're going to cover the history of Kang. So it's kind of an interesting character. His actual name is Nathaniel Richards, which for years and years and years we never knew. He was unknown. And it was funny because like in the 90s, all the characters had secret identities, and sometimes it was even secret identities from the readers. You didn't know their real names. Now we know that Nathaniel Richards was his name, and Nathaniel Richards is actually an heir to Reed Richards, the Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic. So that was kind of an interesting twist that he was a descendant of Mr. Fantastic, which kind of shows where he gets his brains and his genius from. His first came out in a 1967 Fantastic Four comic book in which he traveled back in time, and he actually became a character known as Rama Tut. And this was before he was known as Kang. And Rama Tut, basically, his spaceship was the Sphinx from Egypt. I don't know if you ever knew that, Jason, or not, but he was actually flying around in the Sphinx. And then the Fantastic Four, when they defeated him, he actually, traveled back in time and he locked up the Sphinx and said, "I'm going to leave it here to make everybody wonder what this is, and this is out of place." And that's supposed to be like the origin of the Sphinx in Egypt.
It's better to fly around in a sphinx than a sphincter.
Well, I don't know about that one.
I'm pretty sure one's a little stinkier than the other.
Well, I don't know. I've never been in his Sphinx, so.
Whoa, you've been in his sphincter? Whoa.
Deep into that Sphinx. Nope, never done that. So.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, yeah, moving on.
Okay. Hey, don't ask, don't tell applies in this situation.
Exactly. So we'll just leave it at that. Yeah. And so the other interesting thing about Kang was after he was defeated by the Fantastic Four, he bounced around a few other episodes as Rama Tut, and you kind of saw him, he had another issue where he actually attacked and tried to kill the Avengers, and he actually... The Beyonder, later on you actually see Kang show up in more comic books later issues. And one of the issues that he was famous for was that he actually made a deal with the Beyonder. And his wife had died years before in Egypt, and he asked Beyonder for the power over life and death so he could bring back his wife. And so the Beyonder said, "Okay, but you have to defeat the Avengers in 2 challenges." And the Beyonder is a character like godlike powers, kind of like what you would see on like the level of Thanos, real powerful character, and he has those powers, and kind of like a celestial, and that kind of like a demigod type level. Kang agrees with the Beyonder and says, okay, I'll go ahead and take these 2 challenges. He loses one challenge, and then the Avengers beat him on the last challenge. And so the Beyonder says, well, you did succeed in one challenge, so I'll give you the power over life or death. I won't give you the power over both. So which do you prefer? And Kang, because he was so mad that the Avengers beat him, he chose death so he could use it to kill the Avengers. He says, I want the power to kill all the Avengers. And so Beyonder's like, okay. And so he chose revenge over the love of his wife, which, there's times when I'm like, I could see that being a possibility. I'm like, yeah, why would I bring her back just to chirp in my ear when I could kill the Avengers?
I don't want a honey-do list.
I'd much rather kill the Avengers. Anyway, so he chooses to kill the Avengers, but the Black Knight, who at the time wasn't an Avenger, was able to stop him and prevent him from being able to kill the Avengers. They ultimately were able to defeat Kang in that instance. There were some interesting comics throughout the history of when he was Rama-Tut, and even the last one I want to go over is there was a 4-part Apocalypse origin story, a 4-comic series, and that in that 4-comic book series, we follow Apocalypse from being born, because he's born a mutant, and actually his tribesmen actually leave him out in the desert and to die or whatever, and then you see that Apocalypse is picked up by a band of like roving warrior ninja type people like out in the desert and kind of like sand people, and that's where he gets this philosophy of survival of the fittest. But Kang goes back in time, and you find out they kind of retcon the story of why he went back in time to become Rama-Tut, and you find out that the whole reason he did that is because he knows of Apocalypse, and Apocalypse is immortal and eternal, and so he tries to, instead of competing against Apocalypse, he went back in time as Rama-Tut to try to capture Apocalypse as a child and try to raise him as an heir, which was an interesting story twist. And ultimately, he did end up failing, and Apocalypse would end up growing up with these ninjas, and Rama-Tut never did find him. And then that's when it kind of goes into, you see that the Fantastic Four beat him and sent him back to his own time. And so it's kind of an interesting history as Rama-Tut. He did become king later on. Jason, I want to see if you want to talk about him becoming actually Kang the Conqueror instead of Rama-Tut.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting that he's like, well, since I got my butt kicked, I'm going to go ahead and jump super far into the future and pick up an advanced suit, battle suit, almost like Iron Man, if you will, but a little bit better. Iron Man's cool, but it's got nothing on some of this technology that he has, I mean, of course, he can fly, he's got super strength, he can shoot the energy blasts. But that's kind of where the similarities end. One of the things that he can do is he can control technology around him. He has basically like the ultimate survival suit. He's got 30 days of air, food, and water, which is kind of cool because, that's one less thing to deal with, as Forrest Gump would say, and that's all right. Nah, he wouldn't actually say that. But
does he take a grumpy in that suit? That's what I want to know.
That's true. I mean, if he's in battle or he's in outer space, how does he take a poo? Inquiring minds want to know. So after he gets this amazing suit, which makes me wonder, was this like a top of the line suit? Or was it like a 3rd generation or a 1st generation like POS and is like, well, I can jump 1,000 years into the past and this suit will pretty much decimate all. But, I don't think we're ever going to find
more
that
than
out.
1,000
Maybe
years
we
in the
can
past, because that suit's like from the 39th century. So, yeah, that pretty much would decimate any technology from our 20th century. So,
yeah, not to mention he can control any technology you have. So if Iron Man did go up against him, all of a sudden he's gonna start punching himself in the face, and then Kane will be like, "Why are you punching yourself? Why are you punching yourself?" And Tony will be like, "Stop it! It's not nice."
yeah.
But I digress. I'm getting off topic now. But so what he ended up doing is going back into time and basically with the intent of conquering everything. And when he couldn't do it by himself, spoiler alert, he ended up getting the Council of Kang, which is I love myself, but I don't know if I'd want to be surrounded in a room of me, you know? That might be a little too much. But, he went into different dimensions and times and, timelines and pulled in different iterations of himself to have them help him take over the universe. And
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but not all of them wanted to take over the universe, right?
Well,
And they started kind of
yeah,
butting
they
heads.
crafted the Council of Kings, and there were Council of Kings, and then they had another iteration where there was another Council of Kings that were like wanting to, go against the other Council of Kings. So because
The
yeah, exactly,
vegans.
they're just like, yeah, you know what, we don't want to subscribe to your Kool-Aid, so we're gonna make our own Kool-Aid. And so they actually and for those who haven't seen the Loki TV series, spoiler alert again, but you actually you kind of get that information because Kang tells the two Lokis variants, the one we classically seen from the Avengers movie that got pulled into the or pulled out of their timeline, and then that the female Loki Sylvie,
A hottie.
yeah, uh, which still weirds me out that Loki fell in love with himself. So sort of make
Well, it makes sense. It really makes sense.
yeah, he is a narcissist, so yeah, I could see that happening. So
It's like, I don't know why, but you're just amazeballs.
oh my god, I just love you. Like whoa. So but he kind of goes over that like there was a big war and trying to control timelines, and that kind of goes into that same thing as like the two different councils of Kang sitting there fighting each other, and we got to see that on the Ant-Man post-credit scene. So if you ever see that, it's real brief. It just sees the post-credit scene where a bunch of Council of Kangs, and then it looks like almost an Egyptian style Kang. So I don't know if it's supposed to be like the Rama Tut uh, variant coming out into the crowd, and they're all cheering for the Rama Tut version. So it was an interesting little clip that they had on there and added Loki's TV series. Kind of warned about that was going to happen. So honestly, I feel like the MCU actually did this just because of the fact that they were trying to create a character that could manipulate timelines, and they could successfully bring in some of the other franchises like the Fox X-Men was completely separate universe, and then MCU had complete different universe for just the Avengers and all these other characters. I think they are trying to bring in a character that can kind of alter the timeline. And I honestly, I think that my prediction for the MCU is that Kang's going to ultimately kind of reset the MCU universe, and then we'll see a whole new cast of characters recreated and make it where, okay, now the X-Men and the Avengers were side by side all the time instead of being two separate universes.
Putting
So,
all their eggs in the basket, in one basket.
yeah, trying to, which would be interesting because because they do have an X-Men movie that's supposed to be coming out, so it makes me wonder if that's going to be with Kang, is it's going to be like Kang brings in the Fox X-Men universe, or if it's going to be a whole new cast of X-Men. It will be interesting to see because they have a whole cast and crew, and I wouldn't mind seeing what's her name, Jennifer Lawrence back, so as Mystique. Uh, so
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
latex body paint. I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
no, she screws it up by sitting there actually wearing clothing. What the hell?
Ah. I mean, I know in the comic book she wore clothing, but why screw up a good thing?
She doesn't have the commitment that what's her name, Rachel, or what is
Rebecca
her
Romaine Stamos.
Rebecca Romaine Stamos.
She gets a show wing.
Show wing. So I would definitely sleep her for that. So
Well, that's good because who knows how many men she's seduced.
oh man. So anywho, back to the topic. So on the topic of a sleeve it or leave it, at the end of these episodes, for those who are unfamiliar, or if this is your first episode of the Sleeve It or Leave It, hopefully you've heard our first 2 episodes. Otherwise, I encourage you to go back and listen. For the Sleeve It or Leave It episodes, we always say the issues that we discussed. I keep saying issues. The comic book issues that we discussed. I actually got it right. I was thinking I was said episodes again. So the actual issues that we discussed, would you sleeve it or leave it? Sleeve it meaning sleeve it and put in one of those plastic sleeves that you put comic books in, or would you leave it in the comic book store and not collect this particular issues? So in this instance, I'm a very much a a leave it person for these comic books, because I never really got into the Avengers comic books as much. And I did collect Avengers comics for some of the, the actual big events that happened in the 90s. But I never really followed the Kang the Conqueror issues, honestly. And it wasn't my cup of tea. So to me, I would leave it, except for the Apocalypse 4-part episode. I said it again, episode. The Apocalypse 4-part issues, because I love Apocalypse and I love the X-Men comic books, and that was an interesting story. But as far as Kang as a normal character, I'm a leave it character. I really feel like the Kang the Conqueror became the big bad only because they wanted to manipulate and change the universe. And so it's a perfect character for that, but I'm not a big fan of the character as a whole. So I'll digress from there. And Jason, what would you say? Sleeve it or leave it on your part?
Well, like the used jockstrap at the random guy at the gym, I would have to leave it. Same thing when I saw the end of Loki, and it was just this random guy popped up and they showed the council. I was like, who the hell is that? No idea. I never followed him as a character. The only reason I know as much as I did is honestly because I was doing research for this podcast. I had no idea. When you had reached out to me about, this episode, I was like, okay. I had no
King
idea.
who?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool that he's a time traveler, and there's a lot that they can do with introducing a character that can do that kind of stuff, and the potential is there. But am I going to go back and read the comic books? No. I mean, he came around at a time when comic books were still relatively young, and they were coming up with some, interesting, not so great storylines, some, in ways, and it just
Right.
it doesn't it doesn't blow up my skirt, as it were, and so I'm gonna have to say leave it.
Well, that's first time we both decided to leave a comic book series. But like I said, for those that love King, more power to you. But just in the 90s, it was the X-Men. So, and this is kind of like we're doing more of the retro issues. And honestly, I've heard from other people that a lot of the newer King stuff is really good, but I just never got into that character and never followed him. So, um, but yeah, if you have a comment that you'd like to leave about, a comic book that was worth reading, feel free to comment. And yeah, we'll go ahead and go from there. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. Uh, just as a quick reminder, don't forget to like and subscribe on our Geek on a Leash. We have Instagram and Twitter for Geek on a Leash, and Facebook. So go ahead and visit those, and we'll catch you next time.
Toodaloo.